You have to have a plan. You have to have an opening move, like in chess. A gambit is very important, I think. And then you need to be able to be fluid and be able to go down paths that you're not expecting when a guest says something or you see a moment where you can go deep. And that's how I got Eddie Hall, the strongest man in the world, to cry on camera. So I believe people come onto the show knowing maybe they have a responsibility to say something they've never said before.
What up, it's Mr. X to the Z Exhibit.
What's up, guys? It's Andy Frisella.
This is your boy, Trout Monk.
This is Ryan Serhant.
This is Shingy.
Hi, it's Patrick
This is Sonia Sarbatani.
This is Director X.
Hey, everybody, I'm Forbes Riley.
Yo, this is Goldie.
This is Amberly Lago.
This is Chris Voss.
Michael Francis here.
Yo, this is Charlie Tuna.
Hey, what's up? It's Billy G.
And you're listening to the Run GpG
podcast.
I'm going to go hang out and listen to David's next podcast from the Run GpG.
You might hear something you like. Peace.
I am very excited about our next guest. Brian Rose is a British-American entrepreneur, broadcaster, and the founder of London Real, a media company that produces video and podcast interviews with some of the most interesting and notable figures on the planet. Guests range from entrepreneurs and authors to athletes and public figures, and discussions revolve around topics related to business, personal development, wellness, and current events, of course. Brian also has a background in finance, having worked in banking before founding London Real. His journey into media and public life has been marked by a focus on personal transformation and sharing the stories of influential and inspirational individuals. He's also involved in a number of projects, including a new documentary that has been breaking the internet. Brian, it's an honor. Welcome to the Run GpG podcast.
Great to be here, and thank you for having me. Quite an introduction. I'd say most of that's true.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to getting into it. Brian, it's interesting. I frequently have mentioned to our listeners and subscribers that every once in a while, I'm able to interview people that have had an impact or an influence on my life, which makes some of these episodes personal. And I'm sure you've experienced that interviewing as well. For me, this is one of those episodes, right? Been following you for quite some time when it comes to podcasting, interviewing. You're the man for a lot of us. You're one of the GOATs, as we say. So I do feel grateful that you are here today and making some time to talk about a few of these things.
No, I appreciate you having me. And look, I always love talking about this work. It's my passion. It's my identity. It's like my gift to the world. So really looking forward to the conversation.
No, 100%. And let it be noted that Brian does not do a lot of interviews, and it took me more than a minute to get him on here. So again, I appreciate it. But also, I don't know if you know this, but we've interviewed a number of the same people, right? You may have known that, but the list was kind of surprising when I looked at it.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of crossover, and I guess that means you have good taste. I like to talk to a range of people. I like to talk to people that challenge my own value system, people I don't like, people that make me uncomfortable, people that make me angry. Those are the kind of conversations I want to have, because otherwise there's no growth. And that got me into a lot of trouble over the years, but I wouldn't change a goddamn thing. And I'm really proud of what we've done, and I'm super excited for the future.
Oh, 100%. I can't wait to break that down with you. But where do we start? Because you're such a fascinating person with such an interesting, career and life arc, right? You're American born. You're an MIT educated engineer that went from banking and finance to podcasting and interviewing and running for mayor of London. So that's wild when you think about it. So it would be good to get some context. You talked a little bit about this in your documentary, which we'll get into a little bit later. But can you tell us about your upbringing, the early life that shaped who you are and where you are today? Like, how did you end up here? Maybe just a brief Brian Rose bio for our listeners.
Yeah, look, sometimes I wake up and I feel like my life is a movie. And, one of the goals for the team here used to be is that a year from now, we're going to be doing something that we can't even imagine that we're doing now. It's quite a goal as a business, because you can't even imagine it. It's not like you're going to do 10X or 100X, or I'm going to go to Mars. I'm going to do something I can't even conceive I would be doing. And like, if you look at what we've done the last few years, if you had told Brian from 2017 or 14 or 2011, like that I would be running for mayor, I would slap you in the face. That's the most ridiculous thing. Or I would have a documentary film that won 20 awards. So, I like being surprised, and I like doing really interesting things. I like taking risks. but that wasn't always the case. And we can get into some of that. As far as my background, it's pretty simple. I grew up in San Diego, California. It's a beautiful city. It's a quiet city. I spent 18 years there. I was really a science geek, quite introverted. And that's why I ended up going to MIT, because it was part of my passions. Went out to Boston, which is halfway across the country, or all the way across the country. Went to this incredible institution that just kicked my ass and showed me that I could compete with the best. And that was a huge confidence boost. But I found out about halfway through my degree at MIT that I didn't want to be an engineer. I worked at Ford Motor Company in Michigan one summer. I worked for a company called the Aerospace Corporation in Los Angeles. And I looked at some of these guys and I thought, Jesus, I don't want to be you when I'm 50. It just seemed boring and like it was going nowhere. And then I watched the movie Wall Street, and I figured out that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into finance. And so I kind of did a pivot midway through my degree, started taking classes at the business school, and boom, landed on Wall Street, just like a movie. And so that's exactly what I did. I went to Manhattan, and in 1993, there I was on the 33rd floor of, Bankers Trust Plaza, on a trading floor of 300 people, screaming, yelling, throwing things. And I got an education in finance the old fashioned way, right? You couldn't call personnel and complain when someone tried to punch you, or someone would belittle you or cut your tie off. I mean, this was old school, but they taught me how to make a lot of money. And that's what I did for quite a long time, until I realized that wasn't making me happy. And that's kind of the next part of my story.
Right. So Gordon Gekko Rose on the
I love Gordon Gekko. I quote him all the time when I'm talking and I'm teaching. I honestly think that a young man, or maybe even a young woman, can learn everything they need to know about life by watching the movie Wall Street, which I've seen probably 500 times. And it's biblical. It's so many lessons in there that it's epic. So yes, Gordon Gekko is a hero of mine.
Yeah. Blue Horseshoe Loves Anacott Steel, I think it was. I don't think they did it justice in the second one. I do like Shia LaBeouf, but I don't think they did well with the second one. The original, they should have just left it, right? But so that's the background there. And so you were successful, okay? So you were successful in banking and finance. What motivated you to leave that finance world and then pursue a career in podcasting and media? Why did you start London Real? What was the motivation?
So I came to London in 2002 because it was a job offering, and I was like a hired gun back there. I had one mission pretty much my whole life, was to make as much money as possible. All right. My brain was infected, you might call, with the American dream, or maybe just my twisted version of the American dream. But for some reason, as a little kid, I was always a little bastard capitalist. I was selling candy on the bus with my profit margins, and I was just really kind of into it, even though I was also a tech geek. And so that was my main mission. And that was my metric that drove every decision I made. I would change cities at the drop of a hat if it meant there was a paycheck. So I moved from New York City to Chicago. I moved from Chicago to London. I moved from London back to New York City to be the CFO of a .com startup. And then I moved back to London to get paid. And I worked in London in the credit derivatives industry at its boom for about 9 years. And I was pushing my 40th birthday, and I was tracking my income, because we used to get paid every quarter, these big fat commissions. And I was, to the outside world, I looked like I was a success, right? I had the money, I had the huge flat, I had anything I wanted. I had all the toys. There's pictures of me with Lambos and on any holiday I want. But like deep down inside, I was miserable. I was drinking myself to death. I had no family, no friends. And I actually took a meditation course, which wasn't the easiest thing to take back in 2010. There were no videos on YouTube or any of that nonsense. And 3 weeks later, I woke up one morning and I thought, this isn't making you happy. And I literally walked in and resigned. So that was it. And I had been watching so much of Joe Rogan because I've been training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu since 2002. I went to UFC 38 here in London in 2002 at the Royal Albert Hall. And so I was watching Rogan because I knew him as the commentator. And I saw him doing these really cheap ass podcasts on Ustream when he was sitting on his sofa with Brian Redband. I mean, they were bad. And I saw him at his house talking to Graham Hancock and with Aubrey Marcus talking about ayahuasca. And I would listen to these conversations, David, on a Sunday for 3 hours. And I'd never felt so connected before in my life because I was hanging out with guys that I could never hang out with in my life, having these really intimate, deep conversations that like touch my soul. It's really hard to explain. And I remember, the Rogan track at the end, at the end of one of those 3-hour episodes. And I'd just be like, wow, that was epic because it was real. And so I saw what podcasting was doing. Rogan wasn't even on YouTube then. He was on Vimeo. And so it was early days. And I think it planted a seed. And I thought after I quit banking, I thought I got to start my own show, but I was too scared to do it, but that's kind of where I was in 2010.
So interesting. You mentioned you were an introvert. I don't see it. I don't see it. But
a lot of YouTubers are introverts, a lot. And so they use this platform to connect with the world because we all need to be connected. I mean, what's the greatest punishment that we enact on other humans? We isolate them, right? You put them in the supermax prison, where these people are. And so, there's actually a lot of introverts that are online because this is the way we express ourselves. So it's actually quite common, but I have to push myself to really get out there and public speak or be social, but I found ways of doing it. So I am. I make it look like I'm that guy because I have to be that guy. To build a business and make an impact, you have to be that guy. And so I think a very well-trained introvert is one of the most dangerous weapons in the world because an extrovert draws energy from other people and it can be really bad. They always have to be out, right? They panic when they're alone. So how are you going to plan the future? How are you going to conquer the world if your go-to drug is to go out and be with people and hang out and watch the game and go to the party? I think a well-trained introvert who can push himself to be an extrovert is one of the most dangerous combinations out there. And you see it in a lot of people like the Elon Musks and the Steve Jobs. They're introverted, but they can pitch and they can sell and they can motivate and lead. So I think that's really effective. So if anybody's out there listening who feels they're maybe on the introverted scale, I would say to listen to that. Cardone says there's no such thing and it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy. And, I think he makes a point there as well. If you tell yourself you're an introvert long enough, you'll give yourself an excuse not to go out there and take risk. And that's not okay. So that's my thoughts on the whole introvert extrovert thing.
What an interesting take, but success is on the other side of your comfort zone, always is, right? So you moved from banking to media. Like, what were the biggest challenges or obstacles you faced transitioning from that initial career to London Real?
I mean, I was terrified to do this. I really was terrified, and I didn't start it for quite some time. I think it was 9 or 10 months before the first episode of London Real, which was October 2011, right when the Occupy Wall Street was happening. And I remember I went to the Occupy kind of London version of that. That was like the second episode. So getting over the fact that I was going to put myself on camera, like that was hard. And I remember having a conversation with my dad and I was like, Dad, you should start a podcast. And I was like telling other people, but it took a long time to get up the courage to do it. I mean, it was super uncomfortable. And then, the first 100 episodes were terrible. And, I had no idea what I was doing, but I loved it. And I didn't know why I was doing it. There was no business. There was no purpose. Everyone thought I was insane. My banker buddies thought I was crazy. Maybe they're right. None of them talk to me anymore. My friends and family wouldn't even watch my show. Like, I kid you not, they wouldn't even watch it. I had best friends that knew I was doing this full time that I would reach out to and say, hey, have you watched my show? Oh, no, I'm too busy. I'm like, bro, you're too busy to hit the button for 5 minutes. So like there was no validation from the outside world. Nobody ever heard of a podcast at that point in time. And in the UK, are you kidding me? We're 5 years behind the tech curve. Nobody the hell knew what that was here. So here I was in my kitchen, not far from here, begging people to come to my show. I asked a homeless guy to come to my show one time and he refused. So it was crazy, but I knew deep down inside that I had to keep going. And I honestly, I'm telling you, David, every year I would look myself in the mirror and have a conversation with myself. And I'd be like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this is making no money. No one's watching it. Everyone thinks you're an idiot. You're no good at this. It's barely successful. But I would come back at myself and I'd say, yeah, Brian, but you've got more friends than you've ever had. You're connecting more than you ever were. You're happier than you were. I'm going to give this one more year. And that's what I would do. I'd give it one more year and one more year and one more year. But to be honest with you, it wasn't until 4 or 5 years in that it looked like it was going to be a thing. It wasn't even breaking even, but it might be a thing. And then, but that's how much commitment it took. Yeah.
That's wild. Consistency, resilience, from inviting someone who's homeless, who won't attend a taping, to now interviewing some of the most prominent and notable guests on the planet, right? We asked a similar question to Patrick Bet-David about this because he interviews presidents and things like that. Like, what interviews stood out to you the most over the years? Like maybe a few memorable moments and why they stood out.
Yeah, I mean, I still get nervous and anxious for interviews. I still remember in the early days, which maybe the first 7 years, like the whole day that a guest was coming over, I was like really stressed, and again, a lot of times you would research these people. I mean, the first time I had Graham Hancock on, I mean, Jesus, he had just been on Rogan and like he was this god. And I remember I spent 4 days preparing for him until I over prepared. My brain was so fried. I knew everything about him. I knew like his dog's favorite color. And I learned from that not to over prepare because it's just as bad as under preparing. But, the notable guests that I've had, I usually make documentary films about. We've made 6 feature-length docs, and that's usually what happens. I always like to say, I have to be very careful who I invite into my studio because they're going to change my life. And that's the honest truth. And that's what's different about London Real than with most shows and definitely with mainstream media. If you work in mainstream media, like your producer tells you who to interview, you don't really care. You phone it in, you do whatever they say. If you're on the BBC, you attack them for no reason to get some ratings and you go home. When someone walks in my studio, like Dorian Yates, 6-time Mr. Olympia, I end up going down to Spain and doing leg day with him until I'm about to cry. And then he makes me smoke weed and I can't move for a day. When Ido Portal invites me to go to Israel and move with him and he forces me to do all these crazy things. Dan Pena, the $1 trillion man, invites me to come to his castle in Scotland and puts me through a 7-day boot camp. I mean, there's a reason I dress this way, and the list goes on and on and on. So, it's because I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly open-minded. And I'll tell you a secret, David. When I really look back at this show and I put my psychoanalyst hat on, what I see is Brian searching for a male role model. That's what I'm doing, if I'm really honest. And I think we all are. Now, that doesn't mean that my dad wasn't good enough. My dad was amazing. But I think as men, we're constantly searching for that male role model that could be a combination of a variety of men. And they say it takes a village. And that's what I think my search is. And people used to say early on, how come you don't have more women on? Or how come you don't have this type of person on? And I'm like, look, I'm happy to have anybody on that I want on that I'm going to listen to. But first of all, you're not going to tell me to have on my own damn show. But if I really look, these are usually older men that are teaching me something that I need to learn about life and usually pushing me to be a better version of myself. And that's probably what this is. I don't even know what this is. This is literally me. I feel like I'm an ant in a colony doing this job that I feel like I have to do, and I don't know the bigger picture. But the bigger picture is, I think I'm making a contribution to humanity. I believe this is my purpose, and I love what I get to do. I just love it, and I hated the last few years every day in banking. I hated it, and I would drink myself to death because I wanted to forget the pain of having no purpose, having no connection. So that's kind of a long way of maybe answering your question.
No, I mean, there's a lot to break down there, as time doesn't permit to break it all down, but it's interesting. Like there's a lot of similarities there. Like I tell people all the time, I'm very fortunate to be able to pick the brains of, captains of industry, billionaires in some cases, right? And successful people in whatever, their discipline is. And literally we live in a time where you can be mentored by anyone, right? Dead or alive, actually, because of the internet and other things in media and podcasting. And you actually answered one of my questions, which was, and I know for me, I've had guests that have changed my perspective or philosophy on things from time to time. And it sounds like you've had the same, but I did want to ask you about, you talked about over preparing. I find that I really over prepare for episodes. Like I'll put days of prep work in. So how do you prepare for interviews? I mean, I know everything about Brian Rose right now. I literally know everything about Brian Rose, but how do you prepare?
It's interesting. When I first started the show, I remember I kind of looked online on maybe how I could get some media training.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, I think there were a couple of classes in London that they would teach you how to be a TV broadcaster. Needless to say, I never went down that route. And thank God I didn't, because I've always just found these organic solutions to problems that were ahead of me, or maybe they call them first principles. Like I never tried to do anything like was done before. I did everything the way that I thought it should be done. So again, no editing, no scripting, no nothing on our show. It goes as long as it has to go. I've had 4.5-hour shows before. And again, this was definitely inspired by Rogan, who, led the way with that. And again, with preparation, I always make this joke, David, that if the cameras were off, I would still do this show. And, I remember, when I think it was like a Neil deGrasse Tyson or someone super famous came over and I interviewed them and they left. And I thought, oh my God, I found a way to trick these famous people to come to my kitchen and answer any question I want. It's called a podcast. Like, who's the joke on? It's like, I've got the best seat in the house. And everybody else, I really appreciate that you're watching, but I would do this regardless because I love it. I guess it's called like scratching your own itch. I'm really on a journey and on a search. And there's nobody in that chair that I don't want there. And I always just tell my team, the day I'm sitting down interviewing something I don't want to talk to is the day I go back to being a banker, because it's not worth it. So what I do in the early days, I over-prepared. Graham Hancock, I spent 4 days. The problem with over-preparing is that you already know everything about him. And so sometimes you don't even ask because you assume everybody else knows. And so it's a fine line because, you might have researched their story so much, it's no longer interesting. So it's like you have to find this fine line between a prepared set of questions. And you see newbie podcasters that ask a prepared set of questions and don't react to the guest. And that's a white belt move or a blue belt move, as we would say in jiu-jitsu. You have to have a plan. You have to have an opening move, like in chess. A gambit is very important, I think. A bold gambit, and some of mine go right, some of them go wrong. And then you need to be able to be fluid and be able to go down paths that you're not expecting when a guest says something or you see a moment where you can go deep. And that's how I got Eddie Hall, the strongest man in the world, to cry on camera. And I've had some of the scariest guys in the world, from Nigel Benn, the Dark Destroyer, one of the scariest boxers in the world, cry. And people used to say, is that your metric of success? And I used to say, well, it's not a bad metric of success. It means we hit something. But that's also usually 2 hours deep into an episode, which most people never go. And it's my lighting, it's the background, it's also the history of London Real. I've spoke about some very deep personal things and massive failures in my life. Like, and heroin overdose is not exactly something you want to tell everybody about. And I've told the world about that. So I believe people come onto the show knowing maybe they have a responsibility to say something they've never said before. And I'd like to think that I can frame it, with the brief period of time I have before. I have 20 minutes to meet these people. I believe it's maybe the history of the show, the things that I've said, the vibe, the studio, every detail is there to have an intimate conversation that hopefully someone else can get something powerful out of. And that's ultimately what we try to create.
Yeah, that was an unreal moment when he broke down there. You touched on a few things that, if you're not in podcasts, you wouldn't know this, but you only have a brief amount of time to get to know somebody. And sometimes you'll bring somebody on the show and you think the interview is going to go one way, but it goes completely the other way, or you're expecting a different personality than what shows up, right? So you have to be able to adapt and I think quick, like you said, respond, right? And that comes over time, with more episodes and the more people you meet, building rapport. And sometimes it takes a while into a show before you actually build rapport where somebody feels open and, vulnerable enough to talk about things that are personal and matter, right? So you touched on that beautifully. What a breakdown. And speaking
it's super challenging to do. When I watched Tucker interview Putin, when he was crashing and burning in that first 30 minutes, and I could see him getting frustrated, and I could see Putin hijacking the interview. And again, you could look back also and say, maybe that was the perfect interview, so you could argue whether that was good or bad, but I could feel Tucker because I've had one of those as well. I've got the perfect guest on. This is going to be the greatest podcast of all time. It's going to be watched 50 million times, more than Elon Musk smoking weed on Joe Rogan. I got the guest. I got the questions. You already know in your mind exactly how it's going to go. You're going to take them on a hero's journey. they're going to go, they're going to laugh, they're going to cry, they're going to be inspired, and it's going to be all wrapped up in this beautiful thing at the end. And then it goes wrong 3 minutes in, and the guest is angry or testy or pushing back or has an agenda. And you're just like, oh my gosh, this is happening in real time, and there's nothing I can do about it. And so, yeah, this is what we do. We try to literally create a movie. That's what I'm trying to create, a movie, a beautiful hero's journey script live in one take with someone you've never met. That's what I try to do every single episode. Sometimes I get it right, sometimes I don't. But yeah, that's the process.
I feel it. There's a few episodes I have not aired, by the way, but ones that I thought were going to be really great, sort of bigger names, but I got pissed, like I got angry. It's funny you mentioned the Tucker Carlson Putin interview. You could see Tucker getting rattled. Like you could see him getting rattled. Like Putin wasn't happy. He was just going to say what he wanted to say, and Tucker got rattled. But he's a champion, man. Like he came through that just fine.
I love Tucker. And I love what he said later. He said, look, I'm too old to try to win an interview. And I love that perspective, because here in Britain, the media here has this long legacy of someone winning in an interview. And they have a policy by the regulator that says you have to give equal time to equal views. And it's this terrible media hangover that they try to push on independent media and online media. And it's all nonsense. Like, nobody has to win. You're trying to have a conversation that will enlighten someone with a new perspective. And so I appreciate Tucker saying that, because, if I have to look like an idiot to create a piece of content that'll change someone's life, I'm all for it, man. Put a big nose on me and a big clown hat. If you think I'm a jerk, you think I'm stupid, I don't care. If we can create a piece of media that changes people's lives, that's the goal. So, and I totally respect what Tucker's done. And I loved his perspective afterwards, is that Putin, for Putin, it was a war and he wanted to win. And in his mind, he did. But Tucker wasn't coming from that frame. And I think they both won in the end.
Yeah, it's interesting. Tucker's killing it now without mainstream media, like you, right? Close to 10 million views on social media. Like it's, you don't need a mainstream channel anymore. And that's what a lot of this stuff is proving, right? But, and I do want to get into the documentary in a little bit of detail here in just a minute, but just a little bit further on the show, a lot of your show does focus on personal development, personal transformation and growth. Like, how have you evolved, personally and professionally since starting London Real?
I mean, so many things have changed in my life. I mean, the big ones, getting sober and having children, those would not have happened with London Real. Without London Real, no chance. I would still be drinking every day if it wasn't for London Real. Who knows if I'd be alive. I would not have children. I would not have taken ayahuasca and had these really meaningful psychedelic journeys that would help me, heal past trauma. I wouldn't have had conversations with my parents about their divorce that would allow me to move forward. I mean, I wouldn't use my body the way I do. I wouldn't have the nutrition I have. Like, there's so many things this show has taught me. Now I engineer risk into my life every single day. I wasn't doing that for so long. That's Dan Pena, that I was playing too conservative in my life. I was very successful, but I was still scared. I think most people are scared. And there's that famous saying, playing it safe is the most dangerous thing you can do. And it really is, because you're all going to die and no one's going to care. And 1,000 years from now, or 100 years from now, or even 10 years from now, it won't matter. So why are you living your life based on the judgment of people you don't even like or respect? And that is 99.9% of the people out there. And so this show has taught me so much. Like, I was thinking about this yesterday. I was like, I'm always hard on myself. I'm really hard on myself, which is probably why I used to go to substances, to get away from me. My internal narrative is nasty. And I'm always saying, this isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. But like, I had a moment the other day where I'm like, wow, regardless of the metrics of London Real, I've been able to do things and meet people and learn things. There's no other way that would have happened in my life. Not if I was an entrepreneur, not if I was a public speaker, not if I wrote a book. And again, I've talked to over 1,000 people, and each one of them made me the man I am today. And I'm still improving. So, that's how this show changed my life. I ran to be mayor of London. That's insane. I made one documentary feature film and did a premiere in London at BAFTA. That was insane. Now we're 6 films later, and now we've invested $11 million into 45 different, blockchain startups. Like, that's crazy. Like, all these things that just boggle my mind. The people I now hang out with that are friends of mine, it's crazy. So, yes. Yeah, I mean, I think podcasting is the fountain of youth. I love anybody that decides to get into this space, and I try to support them the best I can. Even if
it's crazy. Some of the guests become your friends. Like, that's what I find interesting is I've continued conversations for years now, and it's wild, and then you have the repeat and the recurring guests that, you've connected with. I think is fantastic. Just another question on personal development. Anyone who follows you knows how disciplined you are with working out and your personal development. What role does self-discipline and routine play in your life, especially, considering how busy you are? Like, what does the Brian Rose daily routine look like? I mean, I follow you, so I know, you work out like a demon. I see that.
Yeah, it's just regimented is what it is. And, I don't want the old Brian to come back. Like, I ain't ever going back to that guy. I don't like him. Nobody likes him. And every time I want to skip my meditation in the morning, or skip my workout, or skip my shower, or change my diet, or, allow negative thoughts in my mind, which I still do sometimes, or put out bad energy in the world. Like, every time I'm about to do that, I think, okay, great. Guess what? He's going to come back. And if I stop these daily habits for a period of time, he's coming back. And that I don't ever want to see that guy again. I hate him. But I know he's a few disciplined days or weeks of routine away from coming back. And so for me, I know that I'm just paying my dues. I'm paying the rent every morning. So when I wake up, I make sure I meditate. From there, I make sure I do even more now. I do a walking meditation. I make sure I spend time with my kids. I make sure I train super hard every day. No excuses. I've just got this whole thing I built up, honestly, from all the intellectual property of all the guests on my show. I break dance now. That's because of Ido Portal taught me a lizard walk on the ground of my gym, and that morphed into break dancing. So now I can spin on my head. It's crazy.
I thought you grew up a b-boy or something. I honestly thought you grew up a b-boy. I did. I thought for sure.
I didn't break dance until I was like 47. Seriously. It's serious. And I did an Ironman race when I was 47. That was a guest that pushed me. And so I just love learning, and I have no interest in limitations, like no interest. And so it took me 4 years to get a windmill in breakdancing. Like, that's a long time, and most kids would probably get it in 4 months or 4 weeks. But I just didn't stop. I love it. I love dance. I think it's an amazing way to express yourself. I still suck at it, but I'm great. And I also get great mentors. So I have one of the best b-boys in the world. Every week, he trains me for 2 hours. He's probably going to the Olympics. And I have some of the best mentors out there. I always pay for the best because life is short. So yeah, it's this routine, and I'm always dialing it in more. I always want to get more sleep. I'm always trying to get better nutrition. Oh, man, I can always be better. So yeah, tomorrow has to be better than yesterday. But yeah, that's some of my routines: daily training, intelligent diet, meditation, walking meditation. Service is a huge thing, like trying to be of service. Whenever you're stressed out or anxious or worried about you, make it about someone else. And when I teach and I broadcast, honestly, it just clears the mind. When you're struggling with problems, if you actually take your time and teach people, I'm teaching every day. I'm doing a master class. I'm in my academy, like for hours a day. It's actually a great way to get out of your own head. And so that's how I do it as well.
100%. It reminds me of the, what you just said reminds me of the, the Japanese phrase for incremental improvement, Kaizen, right? Kaizen, just the incremental little bits every day, It's
a story of London Real. It is. And again, I have all my episodes up. You can see the terribly produced, you can see my bare feet in my skateboard shirt when I interviewed Dan Pena for the first time 10 years ago in his 3-piece suit. You can see my kitchen. You can see all the bad stuff, which is now good stuff, I guess. And then just try to get a little better every ep. And I still am trying to get a little better. Ask my team. I'm always like, that light could be better. We could put an extra camera here. So yeah, that's the story of my life.
Before we get to the current project and the documentary, I wanted to ask you about this specifically. You did run for mayor of London. You've had your issues, with YouTube and some of the social media channels based on the controversy. How do you handle criticism and setbacks? I think you're a perfect person to answer this, both in your personal life and your career. Like, how do you handle the haters?
Up until early 2020, I was begging for recognition. And I was always shocked that someone like the BBC wouldn't ever write an article about London Real. I mean, we were 9 years in the game. At that point, 2 million YouTube subscribers, I think 500 million views. We had made movies. We had made some serious pieces of content and yet I couldn't get the mainstream media to acknowledge us. I couldn't get any type of recognition. Yeah, we had a base of an audience, but it was like, we couldn't break through. And it's something, obviously, you always want your content to be watched by more people. Like, it's something aspirational. And then, the lockdown happened, and I decided to have a very controversial guy on the show named David Icke, because honestly, I couldn't think of anyone else who might be able to give us an answer to what the hell was going on. And since it's my show and I'm going to do whatever the hell I want, nobody was going to tell me what to do. And I have a real problem with that, people telling me what to do. And so we started putting these broadcasts out, and we became world famous, or world infamous, however you want to say it. And I still remember, David, getting text messages from like people in high school I hadn't talked to in 20, 30 years saying, "What's this interview I saw you on? Who's this guy, David?" And I was like, these are going around the world. And so when that happened, that's when I got criticized. Before that, I don't think we had any criticism. And so, to quote Grant Cardone, criticism is a sign of success. I want more. That's his mantra. And that's in my affirmations every day. Criticism is a sign of success. I want more. If you don't have critics, you're not doing a goddamn thing. And that's just the truth. Or you're not actually doing anything. You wake up every day and say, "Oh, the sky is blue and the sun is beautiful." And what? Like, what are you doing? Great art divides. Great anything divides. And if you're actually doing something meaningful on this planet, you're going to get haters, period. Mm-hmm. Now, it took me a little while to understand that. And my haters all came at once. And my haters were the BBC, YouTube, Dropbox, Ofcom, the regulator, probably members of the government, and maybe the FBI and other people who were trying to shut down our messages. So we went big on haters. And then everybody jumped in as well. And we remember there was a lot of fear then. So if you were in the public and you were scared, and a lot of people were scared, then it was very easy to attack me, because, they were in fear and they wanted to attack, and, they didn't like what we were doing. So we got a whole raft of haters, and I got used to them being in my life. And so honestly, it's just a normal thing. And I worry sometimes when I don't have enough haters. I really do. But for me, it didn't bother me. Then we went to the mayor campaign, and you get a just different level of haters. Honestly, the hardest thing, David, is the family. So I tell the family at night, I'd say, don't read Reddit. Don't read the comments, because I don't care. And I definitely don't care. Never cared. Okay. And of course, what do? They read the comments. And so at dinner, I get home after a stressful day trying to become the next mayor of London, or a stressful day trying to not get deplatformed from YouTube, or trying to set up our own platform and get Ike in town, whatever it is. And they're like, "Oh, do you hear what they're saying about you?" And I'm just like, this isn't what I need to deal with right now. Yeah. So that's one of the downsides. But yeah, I just don't care. I mean, they always say only take criticism from people you respect, and even then, I mean, I don't think Pena was very impressed with what I did in 20 or 21, but I didn't give a shit, I knew what I was doing was right. So I don't care. And that's been my attitude. Now, I know not everybody feels that way, but that's the way I took it. And the other thing I noticed is that I had all these professional haters. And so again, I'd spent 9 years and no one ever made an entire video talking about me. But all of a sudden, YouTubers everywhere were spending these hour-long videos covering everything about London Real. I was like, this is incredible. Like, you can't pay for this kind of press. And it was fascinating. I think it was also very profitable for them. It was a great thing to get views and get clicks. I guess the final thing I'll say about this is I got direct messages from Premier League football players, from Wimbledon champions, from supermodels, from world championship boxers. I got DMs from people that blew my mind. saying, Brian, keep going. I'm talking like, Djokovic and all these people, keep going, Brian, keep going, Brian. We're with you 100%. I'll take those people, those 10, 20, 30, 100 people over 10 million haters any day of the week. And so I really found out who were my real friends and real supporters. And I got a whole lot of hate with it. And I will always make that trade. And so it was a beautiful, beautiful time. And I got amazing support. David Hay is a world championship boxer from London. And he wrote me an email the day before our big Ike episode where we were doing it on our own platform. We didn't even know the tech was going to work. It was going to be 1 million people watching it live. There was tons of pressure, tons of stress. It's live. You don't know if Ike's going to make it. You don't know if you're going to get shut down by the police. And he wrote me this message. I get emotional thinking about it. And he basically, he's a huge Muhammad Ali fan as a boxer. And if you go to his gym where he's trained me before, there's Muhammad Ali memorabilia everywhere. And he wrote me this message. He said, Brian, I think what you're doing is akin to Muhammad Ali saying that he wouldn't go and fight in the Vietnam War. He said, what you're doing, he said, and that defined him as a person more than his boxing. He said, I think what you're doing is on that caliber. And to get messages like that, and then you compare them to some YouTubers, it just doesn't compare. So I had so much inspiration during those periods. And even though it was locked down and it was hard and we got hate, I honestly felt this energy from everyone around the world, just like positivity coming towards us. And that's what got us through that crazy time.
What a breakdown. Whether you agree with somebody or not, you have to respect the fact that somebody stands on their 2 feet when it comes to an issue, right? Like you have to respect that, and Cardone's a good example. He's a guy we've had him on the show a couple of times, and he's a guy that talks about his haters, like almost with pride. He's a great example. One more question before we ask about the documentary, because I think this is important to ask you, because you're a case study in reinventing yourself. You're a case study in reinventing yourself. And from my opinion, what advice would you give someone looking to make a significant career change, especially to pursue something that they're passionate about like you did?
Well, first of all, I'd say it's your obligation to reinvent yourself, because in this world today, if you don't, everything's going to pass you by. You have to. And if you look at most people's careers, it's a constant reinvention. Even look at the great companies. They're constantly reinventing themselves to stay relevant. And I'd say it's much more competitive today than it ever has been. So first of all, get yourself out of the illusion that you can't survive without reinventing yourself, because you'll just die. You'll fall along the wayside. You won't be relevant. You won't be successful. You won't be anything. Fear and your relationship with fear it's such an important aspect of having success in life. And risk, just trying to engineer that risk in every single day. Every year I look at the 12 months coming forward and I think, how can I get in trouble? Like what's some real risk I can take? Can I put myself in a boxing match? Can I run for mayor again? Oh my God, why would I run for mayor again? I'm going to get all this hate with all stuff. Yeah. But there's going to be some upside in there too. That's not going to happen if I sit here on my hands and do some more shows. So I'm always thinking, how can I push it to the limit? Because honestly, I feel it's our duty as human beings to go as hard as you can every single day. And I think we're given this beautiful gift this beautiful gift. You get to have these amazing, loving relationships. And I get to hug my kids, and I used to eat a piece of steak, and I used to hang out with a Cardone, and I get to do all these crazy, amazing things. Okay, guess what? You got to pay your dues for that. The price of that is to go as big as possible every single day and to try to be as big of a human as possible. And so I think everyone has that duty to try to reinvent themselves in some way every single day. So kind of that's what I'm trying to do. I think everyone needs to do that. And I think everyone can do that as well.
Thank you. That's a profound thought. It's your duty to reinvent yourself. That's my takeaway. Okay, Brian. So the big news is the documentary, We Will Not Be Silenced. It passed 8 million the last I saw, but you're saying it's creeping up on 10 million views on X. What's it about? Why did you make it? And why is it blowing up?
So this is our 6th feature-length documentary film. Our first film was about Dorian Yates, the 6-time Mr. Olympia bodybuilder, who was one of our biggest episodes when we started. I think he came on in 2013, and it was our biggest show because no one ever heard a guy like that talk at length And people were blown away that this muscle meathead actually had something to say. And he had a lot to say. And so Dorian, we got close with, we had another episode. He invited me down to Spain and he wanted to do yoga with me, of all things. Of course, leg day with, former Mr. Olympia is no joke. And then he wanted me to smoke weed with him, which I didn't really want to do because I don't do that very well, but I did it anyways. And so we made a documentary film out of that. And we premiered it at BAFTA with like 300 people, and it was crazy. That film, it's not the best film because we never made a film before and we didn't know how to make films. But it was the start of this filmmaking journey where we thought we had a guest or a concept or an idea that we wanted to try to make into a movie. And so next, Ido Portal, movement guy, we made a movie about him. Again, an okay movie, but didn't really have a hero's journey. And we were getting there, but still, I can't watch that movie. Next was the $1 Trillion Man, Dan Pena with The Castle. He was the next one in line. We made a pretty good movie about him, but it was our fourth movie called Iron Mine, where I was challenged to do an Ironman race on a vegan diet in 90 days by a hard-talking New Yorker named John Joseph, that we finally cracked really what a good movie was. It was a hero's journey. It's also there where I confessed my former drug habit and overdose. I'd never told basically anybody about that. Hadn't told my wife, my kids, nobody for 16 years. And it all came out in that movie. That's cathartic. So that was our first real movie. The next one was called Reconnect, where I went and drank the plant medicine ayahuasca in Costa Rica and put everybody that came in my studio in the movie without asking for their permission, including Dr. Jordan Peterson, Sadhguru, Gabor Mate, Joe Dispenza, Michael Pollan, New York Times bestseller. I just put them in the movie because they were all telling my story as it went along. Another movie that I thought was up to par. And then when 2020 happened, it was this huge fight. And a lot of people thought they knew what was going on publicly, but they didn't really know what was going on behind the scenes. And, I knew it was a story that needed to be told, but it's a very difficult story to tell because no one goes anywhere and there's not a lot of action. You're going from an Ironman race and I'm training and I'm eating a weird diet and I'm talking to people in an ayahuasca ceremony. I'm going to the jungle and drinking this stuff. And like now, literally you're locked down. And so to try to find a way to tell that story in a really interesting way, it took us a couple of years to figure out. And we finally got it. And I worked with my longtime director, Luis Solarat. And the crazy thing is, David, is that right when we were going to premiere the movie in London last year in October, we made a 2-minute video trailer. And I decided to put it on YouTube. And that is the piece of content that finally got us completely deplatformed from YouTube. And so a movie about censorship got me censored, finally, completely from YouTube. And it's like life imitating art, imitating life. And it was the last thing I needed at that point. But, I believe that when life gives you these things, they are challenges. And when I nearly died from a heroin overdose in 2001, there was definitely a lesson in there. The lesson was, you better change your goddamn game, Brian. And it was now one of the greatest moments of my life. And one of my things I'm most proud of, actually, getting over that. And this will turn out to be that as well. It might take me a few years to figure out how, but that's what happened. And so we dropped this film because we didn't have a YouTube channel. We normally would have put the movie on YouTube. And so since we didn't have the channel, for the first time ever, we could actually put it into film festivals because they require it not having a public release. So I thought, let's take a negative and turn it into a positive. And that's what I'd say to anybody listening. When you look at something as a liability, it's an asset in disguise. You're just not looking at it through the right lens. I remember when I first met my girlfriend, I found out she had a 7-year-old daughter and people would be like, oh no, that's bad. And then I was like, maybe it's not bad. And that was me learning how to be a father. And, now she's my daughter effectively. And it was amazing. So, with this, it was like, okay, it's an asset. So we submitted it to film festivals all around the world, and it's won 20 different international film festivals and blew us away. And so we finally decided to premiere it. There was only one place to do it, which is on X, which is as close to a censorship-free platform that you're going to get with any type of size. And so we premiered it there right after I was on the Alex Jones show in Austin 3 weeks ago. Of course, the same day that Trump gets convicted. So it was a big news day. But Alex helped premiere it. We had an amazing hour episode. Alex is in the movie. Joe Rogan's in the movie. Elon Musk is in the movie. Patrick Bet-David is in the movie. David Icke is obviously in the movie. And it tells the story of what happened to us from March 18th to May 3rd, 2020, where we were basically tried to be shut down by trillion-dollar tech giants, and how we fought back and how we won. So that's what that film was all about. It's been watched by the time this airs, it'll be over 10 million times. And we're really proud of the film, and I think people really enjoy it. And it's pinned now on our Twitter feed, and that's where it's at.
The numbers are unreal. It's wild to think about, like, 2 million views in the last, day and a half, 36 hours, something like that. So it's crazy. And again, the power of like the alternative media, right? Like it's not mainstream media anymore. The power of that. Like when you think about, a show like yours or Joe Rogan's, I mean, he's got more numbers listening to his episodes than, CNN, CNBC, Fox News combined. Just the power of what people are doing privately now is wild to me. Has there been a response from YouTube at all? Like, or anything like that? Have you heard anything?
When they deplatformed us, I think it was September 4th last year, they shut down all of our channels, including my very first YouTube channel from 2007, that all it had on it was like, pictures of my kids from holiday. Like it had no other content on it, and they shut that down. When YouTube, the overlord, decides to censor you and violate your constitutional rights in America and basically commit felonies, there's no appeals process. You are talking to Big Brother, and they don't want to hear from you. And I tried lots of back avenues to try to get this channel back. And I was told by a lot of senior people, Brian, they really, really don't like you there, because we really made them angry, because we pushed it. Now, they had taken me out of the partnership program in 2020. They had demonetized me in 2020, costing us millions and millions of dollars in revenue. And they had given us 2 content strikes. So they had really gone hard on us, but they hadn't actually deplatformed us until last year. There's no appeals process. Now, obviously, the movie has some very controversial stuff, including recorded calls with their executives. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't really care. It's the truth of what happened. I doubt I'll ever hear from YouTube again. I'm hoping we maybe get a president elected that will do an investigation. And we've seen the Twitter files. And if you go into the Twitter files, as Elon Musk said, he didn't buy a social media company. He bought a crime scene. And when he revealed what was actually going on at Twitter, they found out that not only the CIA and the FBI were telling that platform to censor people, there were like 12 other government organizations, from Senate subcommittees to the Democratic Party to the president, telling them to censor people, which is a violation of First Amendment right. And the crazy thing is, David, is when I complained to government that these companies were violating my rights, they said, no. It's a private company, and you signed their community policy, so you have to abide by that. Something Patrick Bet-David said early on. And I was like, oh, okay. Little did I know, behind my back, they were telling those companies to violate those same constitutional rights. I mean, there's something very wrong about that. And so I believe and hope that a new president, whoever that might be, will go in and finally do an investigation into these companies and force them to replatform the creators and to come out and show exactly what happened. We've seen Alex Jones replatformed on Twitter. Same with Andrew Tate. All these people. Why can't that happen with YouTube and Facebook? I mean, these are platforms. These are effectively public utilities to a certain extent. So I'm hoping that'll happen one day. Whether it does or it doesn't, we're going to keep broadcasting, and we're going to find some way to get our message out there regardless.
It is interesting times, when you look back, right? It's a lot to deal with. There was a pivotal moment in that doc where you were in the liquor store, right? You were looking at the bottle, you put it back, right? That was kind of a pivotal moment there. What can you say about the importance of resilience?
There's a line in that movie where I said, I'm really struggling. Here's the real story, David, is that everything else in my life I've ever done has been selfish. It's been about Brian and his reputation and putting more money in his bank account. London Real is the only good thing I've ever done. It's the only thing that has purity. It's just this beautiful thing that I started to create, and now I feel like it's taken me along for the ride. And so when YouTube was about to delete everything I had created and content that had saved people's lives, because people had stopped me on the street and dug their fingernails in my arm saying, Brian, that interview with Goggins saved my life. That interview with, and I'd be like, oh, thank you. They'd be like, no, it saved my life. And to think that all that was going to be deleted, all of that goodness forever, it just got me really emotional. And so it put me to the test, like, what was I going to do? Because without London Real, what do? Like, I got nothing. I got no purpose. I got no community. I got no gift to the world. I got no creativity. I mean, it's just, and then I'm like, okay, well then what happens to Brian without those things? He's self-destructive. He drinks himself to death because he can't handle reality. And so there was a moment where it's like, am I going to go back to that? Then there's a moment where I pause and I go to the liquor store and I put the bottle back and I think, and I say, London Real prepared me to lose London Real. And so the message was all those conversations, all that growth, all that development I did, thanks to the David Goggins, thanks to the Gabor Mates, thanks to the Joe Dispenzas, thanks to the Dan Peñas, had made me strong enough where now I wasn't going to revert back to these bad habits. And so that was kind of ultimately this weird message of the movie where, in fact, now I was ready to be the man that I really wanted to be. So, yeah, that's that kind of moment in the movie where we just see kind of that development arc. And so yeah, I just wanted to put everything out there to try to tell our version of what happened and let the world kind of take that in and decide, what they need to do about that.
Yeah, 100%. I really appreciate that breakdown because you're somebody who can speak to that in a way that I think others can't, so I think that's really, really interesting. So your two-part question, what are your future plans for London Real and like the other ventures you're involved in? And the other part of the question is, how do you see the media landscape evolving now? Like what role do you envision for independent media like London Real in the future?
So for us, it's just onwards. This is a challenge and it's going to end up being one of our greatest moments. It's going to end up building our biggest piece of intellectual property. And it's going to take it from here. I did an interview with Spencer Lodge in Dubai, and he had me in his house on the Palm, and he looked at me and he said, Brian, like, I watched you during COVID. I thought you lost your mind. He's like, you threw it all away. You threw everything away. You could be one of the biggest platforms out there right now, and you threw it all away. And I looked at him and I was like, I didn't throw a damn thing away. I said, before I came here tonight, 3 people stopped me in the street and said, Brian, those conversations in 2020 changed my life. Thank you. And I was like, those were our greatest moments ever. So I'll take that any day over me trying to silence myself and not being able to look myself in the mirror and staying on YouTube. There's a point in the movie where David Icke is in there and he said, banned by Facebook, banned by YouTube. He said, flies off an elephant's back compared to what we have here. And he's talking about love and humanity and the fact we're all one. And so this is just going to be a challenge. We're moving forward. We're embracing other platforms. We're finding ways to continue to put out content to our audience, and we'll continue. I'm teaching. I love teaching. We love the crypto and blockchain space because it embodies freedom. If you own a digital asset, then you can own your freedom. And if you don't, I might argue you're not going to have your freedom. And so some people think, oh, I've got money in the bank. No, you don't. The bank has custody of your money, and that money is being decimated every single day by your government. And at one point, they might say that you can't have it back. And so for us, digital asset ownership is a component of freedom. We're all about freedom of speech, financial freedom. And then we've created London Real Ventures. And again, I ran away from banking because I thought maybe money was the root of all evil. And as they say in Godfather 3, just when I try to get out, they drag me back in, right? And so Pacino says that line. And so I love what we're doing now. I got a group of people that invest alongside. And I said earlier, made about 45 investments in blockchain. We bring the CEOs onto the show. And I love this industry. There's so much love in this industry, so much innovation, so much positivity. So that's what we're doing. Teaching, broadcasting, making money, making films, and off to the future. That's what we're doing.
Incredible, Brian. The wrap-up question, 2 fun ones now. 2 fun ones. If you could have dinner with any 3 people in history, past or present, who would they be and why?
Man, I'm never good at answering these questions. I recently saw the movie Gandhi. I watched it again, and I think he could be an interesting guy to have dinner with. Genghis Khan, maybe I'm a little curious about what he's like. And maybe put Trump in there as well. I think that would be a fun night. So that's just off the top of the head.
Gandhi, Khan, and Trump. What a dinner table. Okay. Final question, Brian. You're opening a bottle of champagne 1 year from now, celebrating something you've accomplished. What would that be?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't open a bottle of champagne because... Oh,
sorry. Sparkling cider, Brian. I apologize profusely. You're opening a bottle of sparkling cider 1 year from now. What would that be?
Yeah, I wouldn't do that because it's the worst drug that's ever been created. And yet it's a socialized norm, but we won't get into that. And this is from a
You don't
guy.
have to drink it. You can open it. You don't have to drink it though.
Yeah, that's true. But then I'd be encouraging other people too. And this comes from a guy that drank enough for 10 lifetimes. So no judgment. I've been there before. Celebrating something a year from now, what would that be? For me, first of all, happiness is super important. And again, I had a guy named Dennis Prager on the show who's got, an old history in media. And he said, it's my job every day to be happy. And I think that's a really interesting way of looking at your life, is that it's my job to be happy. And so I have to choose to be happy every single day for everybody around me. And that's what makes me a good leader and a good father and a good anything. So I want to make sure that I'm happy and choosing to be happy. Some things would be good milestones. It'd be great, maybe to be back on YouTube. It'd be great to celebrate, $100 million invested. It would be great to having conversations with amazing cutting edge guests that are constantly challenging me. All the things that I do, I want to just continue to do. Like, I really love this. I wouldn't do anything else. I feel super grateful to be able to do this every day, to create, to express, to learn about people. I feel like London Real is two things, and I'll finish on this. First of all, it's a crucible. It's a crucible, and I'm in the middle of it. And so it forces me to go into all my fears and to push all my buttons every single day, because normal Brian would like to curl up on a sofa and watch, a six series of some show and not engage with the world that can hurt us. So it forces me to show up and be that guy every day. It's also an incredible atelier, if you will. It's a workshop where I can do anything I want. I come in this office in the morning, I'm thinking, we could go run for mayor. We could make a documentary film. I could go invest in a brand new startup company. I could do anything I want. And so this gives me the chance to do anything I want. And that is just incredible. And I feel so empowered. And so I really don't know where we're going. We're going somewhere that you couldn't even fathom. And that is super exciting. So that's the future for us.
That does sound exciting. Brian, thank you so much. Where do you want the people to follow you, find you? What links do you want them to go to? We'll make sure we have that in the show notes.
Yeah, look, basic website, londonreal.tv, has all of our socials on the top. The movie right now is pinned on our feed on X. If you want a hot link there, it's londonreal.tv/X. We'll take you right to that post, or you can go to X. Our account is @LondonRealTV, and it's pinned there at the top. Please, if you can, watch it. If you're feeling it, share it. That's how we've gotten this exposure. A lot of former guests are retweeting it and sharing it. That would be amazing. And that's it. Subscribe, watch us, and take a ride.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Brian.